The lie of individualism. The modern world is obsessed with the myth of the rugged individual. We are constantly fed narratives of self-made success, the lone wolf who conquers the world through sheer personal will, and the belief that emotional pain is a solitary battle that must be overcome through individual grit and therapy. While self-reflection is vital, this fierce individualism is a profound and dangerous lie when it comes to true, deep healing. It isolates us, making us believe that the weight of our trauma, our grief, or our mental health struggles is a burden we must bear in silence. This script challenges that narrative. We are not designed to heal alone. In fact, our very neurobiology is wired for connection, and the most potent medicine for the fragmented self is the collective embrace of a thriving community. This isn't just about having friends, it's about utilizing the community as a vital cognitive and emotional scaffold, an external support system that takes on some of the immense load when our internal systems are overwhelmed. The scientific blueprint, externalizing regulation. To understand the healing power of community, we must first look at the science of regulation. When a person experiences trauma, chronic stress, or severe emotional distress, their internal regulatory systems, the prefrontal cortex's ability to logically manage amygdala-driven fear responses, often go offline. The internal signal is simple: danger, panic, collapse. Healing begins when a person can move from this state of dysregulation, high alert or shutdown, to a state of co-regulation. Co-regulation is the beautiful, subconscious dance where two nervous systems interact to achieve mutual calm. When you are sitting with a trusted friend, therapist, or a member of a support group, and they remain present, grounded, and empathetic, their regulated nervous system sends a quiet, biological signal to yours. It is safe now. The community, therefore, serves as a massive, reliable external hard drive for our emotional stability, allowing us to temporarily offload the burden of constant self-monitoring. We are literally borrowing their calm, their perspective, and their capacity to hold the pain, giving our own internal mechanisms the crucial rest they need to repair and reboot. Community as a bridge to self-compassion. One of the most insidious effects of trauma and mental illness is the constant crushing weight of self-blame and shame. We internalize our struggles as a personal failing. I am weak. I am broken. I am unlovable. This is where the community scaffolding becomes absolutely indispensable. When we share our darkest stories in a safe space and hear others articulate almost identical experiences, the shame instantly loses its power. This moment of mutual recognition is called universalization. Seeing your struggle reflected, not in a cautionary tale, but in the life of a strong, surviving person, rewrites the internal script. It transforms "I am a failure" into "This is a universal human experience that I am navigating." The community acts as an external mirror of acceptance, reflecting back to us a truth that our critical inner voice obscures. You are worthy, even in your pain. By observing how the community extends grace and compassion to others, we are taught, by proxy, how to extend that same grace and compassion to ourselves. It is a vital and organic lesson in empathy that cannot be learned in isolation. The architecture of belonging, safety, and predictability. Beyond emotional mirroring, the very architecture of belonging provides a foundational layer of healing, safety, and predictability. Trauma is fundamentally an experience of chaos, rupture, and the destruction of personal safety. A true community, be it a support group, a religious organization, a volunteer network, or a committed group of friends, reintroduces order. The consistent meeting times, the predictable rituals of checking in, the established rules of confidentiality, and the unwavering presence of familiar, non-judgmental faces create a stable anchor in a world that feels volatile. When your internal world is stormy, the external stability of the community is a lighthouse. This sense of predictability and reliability is a profound nervous system regulator. It allows the body, which has been braced for the next disaster, to finally unclench. It's the quiet knowledge that, come Tuesday night, your people will be there, and they will hold space for whatever you bring. This reliable rhythm, this consistent presence, slowly but surely retrains the nervous system to perceive the world as fundamentally safe, a necessary precursor for any deep psychological healing to occur, a new definition of strength. Therefore, true strength is not the ability to bear the burden alone. It is the wisdom to distribute the load. It is the courage to admit, I cannot carry this right now, and I need a hand to hold it with me. The community is that hand, that scaffold, and that external regulator. It's time to retire the myth of the lone wolf and embrace the scientific and emotional truth. We heal better, faster, and more completely in connection. We have only just begun to scratch the surface of how the collective human spirit facilitates individual recovery. The next part of this exploration will dive into the specific roles community plays, as a storyteller, as a holder of hope, and as a laboratory for social risk-taking. Community as the collective storyteller, reclaiming the narrative. When we experience a traumatic event or a prolonged period of suffering, the memory is often stored in a fragmented, disorganized, and hyper-emotional state. Trauma hijacks the narrative center of the brain, leaving the individual with raw feelings but no coherent story that makes sense or allows for closure. The community's crucial healing role here is to act as the collective storyteller. When individuals share their scattered, painful fragments, a moment of fear, a feeling of inadequacy, a memory of loss, the group weaves these pieces together, not into a simplified, happy ending, but into a cohesive and validated account of the struggle. This process of hearing and being heard helps the individual's brain to sequentially organize the memory, moving it from the volatile emotional center, the amygdala, to the narrative center, the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. The community's response, yes, that was a terrible thing that happened to you. No wonder you feel that way, provides the external validation necessary to stabilize the internal narrative. They help to frame the story not as a failure, but as a journey, a battle survived. They hold the arc of your narrative when you only see the current, painful chapter. The gift of witnesses, active and empathetic presence. A core component of this narrative reclamation is the gift of witnesses. In the context of healing, a witness is not just someone who listens, but someone who listens with active, empathetic presence and validates the reality of the pain. Trauma often involves experiences that were denied, minimized, or dismissed by others, leading to a crippling sense of unreality or gaslighting. To sit in a circle of people, share your truth, and have them collectively nod, breathe, and acknowledge the validity of your experience is profoundly reparative. These witnesses confirm that your pain is real, your experience is valid, and you are not making it up. This communal witnessing is a form of social justice at the micro level. It reverses the isolating effects of minimization and reestablishes a felt sense of shared reality. Furthermore, by being a witness to someone else's story, we perform a reciprocal act of healing. It shifts our focus outward, reminding us of our own capacity for empathy and strength, thereby moving us out of a self-absorbed state of emotional stagnation. We receive healing by giving healing, weaving the thread of hope, seeing the possible future. When an individual is deep in the throes of mental illness or grief, their cognitive capacity for envisioning a positive future is severely diminished. The emotional pain creates a tunnel vision where the present moment of suffering appears to be the only available reality. The community acts as the hope weaver, holding the possibility of a better future when the individual cannot see it for themselves. They do this simply by existing as living proof of recovery. Seeing someone who was where you are now, struggling, despairing, yet managed to find a path through, is arguably the most powerful therapeutic intervention there is. It's not a platitude, it's empirical evidence presented in the flesh. The community says, through their stories and their presence, I was broken, and now I am here. You can be here too. They are the collective memory keeper, holding the memory of your potential and your eventual healing, allowing you to temporarily forget the future and simply focus on surviving the present moment, trusting that the community holds the map and the light. Community as a social risk laboratory, relearning trust. One of the most persistent wounds left by trauma is a deep, primal inability to trust, either in ourselves, in others, or in the world's fundamental safety. Healing requires relearning how to take social risks, the risk of being vulnerable, the risk of being seen, the risk of asking for help, and the risk of attachment. A safe community functions as a social risk laboratory. It's a low-stakes environment where one can practice these essential skills. The rules of engagement are clear: respect, confidentiality, and non-judgment. Within these boundaries, a person can test the waters of vulnerability. They can disclose a small piece of their pain and observe the reaction. When the reaction is consistently one of acceptance and support, the individual's system begins to update its core belief. Vulnerability does not lead to abandonment or harm. It leads to connection. This positive reinforcement, repeated over time with a reliable group of people, is what gradually dismantles the walls of isolation and rebuilds the fundamental human capacity for healthy attachment and trust. The community is the training ground where the isolated individual learns how to re-enter the world with a sense of safety and open-heartedness. Beyond survival, thriving together. Healing is not just about returning to a baseline of functionality. It is about thriving and discovering a deeper sense of self and purpose that transcends the trauma. The community facilitates this transition by providing avenues for contribution and purpose. Once a person has received healing, the natural human urge is to pay it forward. By mentoring a newcomer, sharing a strategy that worked, or simply helping to set up the chairs for the next meeting, the individual moves from the passive role of receiver to the active role of contributor. This shift in identity is monumental. It affirms one's inherent worth and value and reinforces the foundational truth that the wound can become a source of strength that benefits others. The healing process is therefore cyclical. Receiving connection allows for individual repair, and giving connection confirms that the repair is complete and purposeful. Neurochemistry of connection. The community's pharmaceutical effect. The healing power of community is not merely psychological, it is profoundly biochemical. When we engage in meaningful, safe social interaction, our bodies release a flood of powerful neurochemicals that directly counteract the destructive effects of stress hormones like cortisol. The most prominent of these is oxytocin, often dubbed the love hormone or the cuddle chemical. Oxytocin is released through touch, shared laughter, deep eye contact, and the act of giving or receiving compassion. In the context of community, oxytocin acts as a powerful physiological antidote to fear and isolation. It dampens the activity of the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and promotes feelings of trust, bonding, and calm. Furthermore, meaningful connection boosts the release of dopamine, associated with pleasure and motivation, and endorphins, natural pain suppressors. In essence, the community operates as a natural pharmacy, providing a constant, low-dose infusion of positive neurochemicals that help to regulate the nervous system, reduce inflammation, and increase the body's overall capacity for resilience. Simply sitting in a non-judgmental circle of people can physically lower your heart rate and your blood pressure, a measurable biological event that validates the truth. Connection is medicine. A concept of the container, holding the chaos. In psychological terms, a crucial function of the healing community is to act as a container. When a person is experiencing intense emotions, grief, rage, despair, anxiety, these feelings can feel overwhelmingly chaotic, like a tidal wave threatening to destroy them. The container is the collective capacity of the group to hold and withstand these intense, uncomfortable emotions without collapsing, judging, or attempting to fix them prematurely. The container says, "I see your pain, and I can handle it. You don't have to manage this all by yourself." This is a profoundly stabilizing experience. If the individual feels safe enough to express their full emotional reality, and the container holds steady, the intensity of the emotion eventually begins to subside naturally. The community's non-reactivity is the key ingredient. They don't panic, they don't try to intellectualize the feeling away, and they don't share an irrelevant competitive anecdote. They simply witness and hold the emotional space, allowing the chaos to express itself, be contained, and ultimately dissipate. This skill of holding is what teaches the individual that difficult feelings are transient and survivable, rather than catastrophic and isolating. Time and patience, the gift of non-urgency. The healing journey is rarely linear and almost never fast. The modern world demands quick fixes and immediate results, which puts undue pressure on the individual to get over it. The community offers a radical countercultural gift: time and patience. A true healing community operates outside the urgency of capitalist efficiency. It understands that grief is not something to be cured, but something to be carried, and that trauma recovery happens at the pace of the nervous system, not the calendar. This slow, persistent presence, the knowledge that the group will be there next week and the week after, regardless of your progress, is immensely liberating. It removes the pressure of performance from the healing process. In this space of non-urgency, the individual is allowed to regress, to struggle, to remain silent, and to take small, hesitant steps forward without fear of disappointing the audience. The community's collective patience is an act of deep faith in the individual's inherent capacity to heal, a faith that the individual may not yet possess for themselves. They essentially lend you their long-term perspective until you can reclaim your own. Beyond the self, integration into the wider world. The ultimate goal of community healing is not to become perpetually dependent on the group, but to use it as a launchpad for reintegration into the wider world. The community functions as a micro-society, a safe, managed environment to practice the skills needed for life outside its walls. However, the healing journey must also involve finding connection outside of the core group. Healing means being able to take the hard-won lessons of vulnerability, boundary setting, self-compassion, and co-regulation and apply them in one's daily life, at work, with family, and in new relationships. The most effective healing communities actively encourage this outward movement. They celebrate small acts of external engagement and help process the inevitable setbacks that occur in the less-than-perfect world outside. They teach the essential truth that connection is a verb, an ongoing practice of reaching out, setting boundaries, and allowing oneself to be known, which transforms from a therapeutic exercise into a genuine way of life. The call to action: be the scaffold. If we accept the premise that community is a life-sustaining, healing scaffold, then the final necessary question is, how do we build and sustain it? The answer is that community is built not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of presence, vulnerability, and non-judgment. It requires us to show up with our own imperfect selves, to put down our phones, to look someone in the eye, and to allow for uncomfortable silence. It means volunteering to hold the chaos when someone else is drowning, and having the humility to ask for the container to be held for us when we are. The healing power of community is not a passive resource. It is a living contract that we must actively renew every single day. Archetype 1. The formal support group. Structured validation. Not all communities are created equal, and the type of scaffold needed depends on the weight being carried. The most formally structured community is the support group, e.g., AA, grief groups, illness-specific networks. This community archetype excels at providing structured validation. It is a space where the shared problem is the price of admission, instantly eliminating the need for prolonged explanation or justification of one's pain. The healing mechanism here is its relentless focus on the shared experience. This structure offers distinct steps, literature, and rituals that provide a sense of control and mastery in the face of chaos. For individuals struggling with addiction, chronic illness, or specific trauma, the support group's healing power lies in its institutionalized hope. It is a proven, reproducible model of recovery that has existed for decades. The structure holds the form, and the shared vulnerability fills the space, offering a healing dynamic that is both personally revealing and universally stabilizing. Archetype 2. The intentional learning community. Collective growth. A second, often overlooked, healing archetype is the intentional learning community. Groups centered around shared skills, like a craft cooperative, a philosophical discussion circle, or a specific volunteering project. The healing in this context is indirect, yet potent. It provides a sense of efficacy and distraction with purpose. When an individual is consumed by inner turmoil, engaging in a shared, tangible task, planting a garden, building a bookshelf, learning a new language, forces the mind out of its ruminative loop and into the external, physical world. The community here serves as a safe distraction mechanism and a gentle re-entry point for social interaction. The focus isn't on the trauma itself, but on the creation of something new and shared. This helps the individual to remember and practice their inherent competence and capacity for positive contribution, which can be deeply eroded by long-term stress or depression. It says, "You are a whole person, not just a set of symptoms. Come and create something with us." Archetype 3. The unspoken community. Shared space and presence. The most subtle yet powerful archetype is the unspoken community. This is the feeling of belonging found in shared physical space, like a local coffee shop, a familiar park bench, or a consistent exercise class. The healing here is driven by unconscious co-regulation and non-verbal belonging. Simply being near others who are regulated, functioning, and going about their day sends a subconscious signal of environmental safety. We don't have to talk, but we are not isolated. This casual, low-demand connection counteracts the primal feeling of being cast out that often accompanies profound emotional struggle. The background hum of normal life, filtered through the gentle presence of others, reminds the isolated person that the world is still turning and that they still hold a valid space within it, without the pressure of having to perform vulnerability. The unspoken community is the ambient noise of belonging, a constant, low-grade source of comfort. The digital paradox: connection versus performance. In the 21st century, we must address the digital paradox of community. Online groups offer incredible accessibility, instantly connecting people with rare conditions or complex issues who might otherwise never find each other. This digital scaffold is a lifesaver for those with geographical limitations or severe social anxiety. However, the paradox lies in the shift from authentic connection to curated performance. Many social media platforms are designed for broadcasting an idealized self, not for vulnerable sharing. Healing requires deep, messy, unedited truth, which is often difficult to sustain behind the screen, where the temptation to present a recovering or strong self is constant. True digital healing occurs in small, moderated private groups, where the rules prioritize genuine vulnerability and mutual witnessing over likes and views. The platform is merely the conduit. The intention of non-judgmental co-regulation remains the critical component. The future of healing. Prescribing connection. The future of comprehensive mental and emotional healing must integrate the power of community formally. We are already seeing the emergence of social prescribing, where doctors and mental health professionals explicitly recommend non-clinical activities and group connections, gardening groups, choirs, art classes, as part of a treatment plan. This acknowledges that the answer to loneliness, anxiety, and trauma is not always a pill, but often a person. For humanity to truly heal its collective trauma, we must move beyond treating the individual symptom and begin to treat the fundamental human condition, our need for belonging. The community is not an add-on, it is the primary ecosystem of health. Our call is not just to find our community, but to actively participate in building, sustaining, and defending the safety of the container, ensuring that for every individual struggling in silence, there is a ready, open circle waiting to say, with undeniable truth, "You are not alone." Practical mechanics. The community as a system of shared labor. The healing power of community extends beyond the emotional and psychological. It delves into the realm of practical mechanics. A common symptom of severe depression, trauma, or chronic illness is the loss of the ability to handle daily, life-sustaining tasks. The dishes pile up, the bills go unpaid, essential appointments are missed. This inability to manage basic life maintenance fuels shame and a sense of spiraling failure. The community steps in here as a system of shared, non-judgmental labor. This is not charity. It is the practical extension of empathy. A meal train for a grieving family, a neighbor offering to drive someone to a medical appointment, or a friend helping to sort through overwhelming paperwork are tangible acts of healing. They reduce the immediate acute stress load, freeing up the individual's limited emotional energy to focus on internal repair. When the community says, "Let me handle this small piece of your life for a while," it sends a powerful message. Your survival is a collective priority. This practical assistance dismantles the immediate sources of shame and provides the structural stability needed for mental recovery to gain traction. The erosion of isolation, disarming the primal threat. Isolation is the single most destructive force against healing. Evolutionary biologists suggest that for early humans, separation from the tribe was a death sentence, a primal threat that triggered a cascade of panic and survival hormones. Even in the modern world, being alone triggers this ancient life-or-death alarm system. The community's greatest therapeutic function is the erosion of isolation. It disarms this primal threat by providing consistent, visible proof that the individual is still interdependent and valued. This process begins with simple, consistent effort. A text message that asks, "I don't need a reply, just letting you know I'm thinking of you," or a drop-in visit with no agenda beyond presence, slowly chips away at the concrete wall of loneliness. It teaches the nervous system that the individual is not in danger, even when they feel their worst. The healing is not in the grand intervention, but in the persistent, mundane, and reliable refusal to allow the silence to win. The community is the collective voice that counters the isolating lie with the repetitive grounding truth. We see you. You belong. The balance of giving and receiving. Mutuality in healing. For a community to be a sustainable source of healing, it must foster mutuality, a healthy balance between giving and receiving. A purely passive recipient of aid often struggles with feelings of dependency and inadequacy, while a purely giving member risks burnout. True healing community encourages the movement between these roles. As noted earlier, the act of giving back is a powerful catalyst for self-worth. It reframes the individual not as a burden, but as a resource. Even in the depths of struggle, a person can offer their presence, a kind word, or a simple acknowledgement. The healing is completed when the individual realizes they are both worthy of receiving help and capable of providing it. This mutuality ensures the sustainability of the scaffold itself. It creates a dynamic ecosystem where everyone has a role, confirming the inherent value and agency of every member, regardless of where they are on their personal journey of recovery. Conclusion: the retribalization of the human spirit. The story of human flourishing is fundamentally a story of collective resilience. We have survived plagues, disasters, and historical trauma, not as brilliant, self-sufficient outliers, but as interdependent groups who shared the burden, held the hope, and built structures of mutual aid. The modern healing community is the retribalization of the human spirit, a necessary reclamation of our biological and psychological design. It is the place where the fragmented self finds its whole by integrating with the greater whole. The question is no longer if community heals, but how deeply we commit to being the healing agent. This requires us to cultivate radical acceptance, to practice the difficult art of non-judgmental listening, and to consistently show up, not with advice, but with presence. The power is in the collective we. So, look around you. Identify the cracks in the isolation. Be the one to extend the scaffold, to share the narrative, to hold the hope, and to offer the practical help that allows a weary soul to rest. You are not alone, and by showing up for others, you ensure that they are not alone either.